Hi, today we're playing the hardest racing game ever made. And you might be thinking, okay Christian, come on man, that's a bit hyperbolic, right? It's clearly like an RC racing game, how tough could it be? No, watch the footage, okay, and you will probably quickly see why I'm saying that. Revolt, which we might have had on the weekly waypoint before, I don't know, we're on episode 396, I can no longer remember every game we've done. This is the more popular original game in the same series that gave us RC Revenge. And RC Revenge has definitely been on the weekly waypoint before because it's one of my favourite racing games of all time. It's one of my favourite PlayStation 1 games ever made. But that one seems to be a little bit lesser known for some reason. But this one, I've always said, since I learned that RC Revenge is basically a spiritual successor to Revolt, even though it's made by like the same devs and stuff, Revolt definitely feels a lot more... Well, I mean, the stages are set in hypothetical real-world locations, and the tracks are wider and more open, and there's more opportunity to get lost. And just in general, this game is a lot more difficult because there is no traction. There is absolutely no traction on these cars. You will spin out at the slightest turn. You will bump and tumble over end to end at the slightest inconvenience. And that turns racing into this kind of almost luck-based system, it feels like, in which, hey, you might come out in first. It kind of depends on how everyone did. How did they do? Wasn't necessarily dependent on skill. These cars weigh nothing. For those of you wondering, I am using the simulation difficulty, which says, I think it's meant to be the hardest. So that might be why, but I remember using the easiest difficulty / handling, and it kind of feels the same, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. I remember I actually played a decent amount of this game on my iPod Touch because it had a mobile version, and I think that was the first place where I played this game, and I think I did get pretty decent at it, so it's definitely the kind of thing that you can try your hand at and get better at and succeed at over time. But good lord, just look at this. It's damn impossible. I'm not going to give away whether I actually make it through the Bronze Championship here, because it could be a yes or it could be a no. If you fail to qualify in third place or higher each race, you have to retry it, and you only get 3 retries per championship. RC Revenge was definitely an easier game. But yeah, I think that might be what makes this footage interesting. It's not a guaranteed win. It's not where I just pull out in front and stay in first the entire race. I did just do my obligatory yearly Steam search of if any of my PS1 / PS2 favourite games got re-releases on Steam without my knowledge, but no, alas, no RC Revenge, no Motor Mayhem, no Gauntlet Dark Legacy, no frickin' Fur Fighters Vigo's Revenge. The reason why these games are on my mind is because this week I put out a video about my top 10 PlayStation 2 games of all time. Go check that video out if you haven't already. I put a fair bit of work into it, although maybe not as much as I could have, because I did initially set out to include gameplay footage of every game presented, but goodness me, that would have taken multiple days, and it suddenly felt like a massive chore, and unfortunately I do this channel for a hobby. So if it was my job, if I was getting paid to do it, I would happily go and gather footage and spend multiple days on a project. But alas, it is not to be this time. Podcast mode, go. I still think it's a pretty fun video though, and I have already begun work on my top 10 DS games of all time. Good lord, look at that guy, he survived that, that's crazy. But beyond old PlayStation 2 games, what video games have I been playing this week? I actually have a decent bit to talk about this week. Because first of all, I picked up a couple of games on the PlayStation Studios Steam sale. I was very tempted to pick up God of War for 15 quid. Because I've already played through God of War on the PS4, but I did pretty much story % completion. I never stopped and went and smelled the roses and saw the other things. However, I thought, should I pick up a game that I've already played and beaten, or should I pick up a new game that I have not played and beaten yet? So instead, I picked up Spider-Man Miles Morales, and I haven't played it yet because I haven't finished my Spider-Man Remastered playthrough yet that I picked up last year for PC, despite having already beaten the game on PS4. You know, I'm trying not to make it a thing where I just keep buying the games I've already beaten, although I probably will buy God of War and play through it again before I buy God of War Ragnarok. But, however, due to this, I have re-downloaded and continued my playthrough of Spider-Man Remastered, and yeah, I'm remembering why this is one of my favourite single-player games I guess, on the PS4. But yeah, I think I last played it in January or something, so this is kind of like a start of the year and end of the year cap. I will be interested to see my Steam played activity feed thing that they do at the end of every year. We'll do a video where we go through that. It's gonna be messy, but thankfully, because I've already played the game to completion before, I didn't feel too out of my depth in terms of, wait, what the hell was going on with the story. The main thing is, you know, I'm just not good at it anymore. Like, it's not that I'm struggling with the controls because I haven't played it in a while, but it's more just that my instincts have gone, so I'm having some trouble. But I think Spider-Man, at least at like the default normal difficulty, has always been like a pretty well balanced, challenging game. So maybe that's just me forgetting that. I don't keep dying or anything, but I've come close a few times. But yeah, very much looking forward to finishing that up and then playing through Spider-Man Miles Morales. And then, of course, I can look into getting Spider-Man 2 at some point in the future. And, you know, I think the thing that's really got me wanting to catch up with the Insomniac Marvel games is knowing that they are working on Marvel's Wolverine. I'm not a crazy Wolverine guy, but I could be in the future. Like, it's just because I haven't really explored the character yet. I want Insomniac to finish up Wolverine, make Spider-Man 3, because we can't go too long without a Spider-Man game, they're too good. And then after that, maybe work on a Daredevil game, please. That would be wonderful. And of course, while they're doing that, if they could continue churning out Ratchet and Clank games, that would be fantastic. You know, I feel like it's not too much to ask, right? Come on, just get like your 5 best guys on it, sure. I mean, how hard can it be to make a critically acclaimed video game series, right? Just keep making them, that's my advice. The other game I picked up is Returnal. Returnal is a PS5 game, obviously ported to PC because I don't own one of those machines, which is a third-person action roguelike where you are basically playing as the... Well, I actually don't know her occupation, but she's a space explorer, and she crash lands onto this alien planet and finds corpses of her future selves and audio logs she hasn't yet recorded and all sorts of creepy things. If you look into the lore of it as well, the planet is also, I believe it's meant to be like this exoplanet in terms of like it doesn't belong to a solar system and it also doesn't even belong to the galaxy. Like it's like a world they found out in the void, I think. If I'm reading into that correctly, that is. And that is a fascinating setting for me. I love that concept so much. And if you like Alien or if you like Metroid, you know, it's that kind of a science fiction aesthetic. Obviously Metroid's more family friendly than Alien, but you know what I mean? They do kind of share an aesthetic. And it's a roguelike, so you're running around this randomized zone. Apparently there are 6 different biomes. It's pretty notoriously difficult. I have yet to get past the first boss and into the second biome. I'm assuming that's what happens after you beat the first boss. That being said, the runs are quite long. I would say 45 minutes up to an hour for me to get to the first boss. I could definitely do it faster if I was trying to, but, you know, just in terms of, like, exploring each room, quote-unquote room, and like finding everything within and doing my best not to take hits, because it's got a really cool like adrenaline system where the more enemies you defeat without taking hits, the more perks you get, such as your active reload kind of empowering your weapon if you do it correctly, or you know, that particular thing being more powerful, and like seeing enemy footsteps and stuff like that. And I mentioned the difficulty. It is difficult, but it's difficult in a satisfying way. It's not difficult in a frustrating way. You know, if you end up on super low health after a particularly gnarly encounter, you can claw your way back up to full health if you manage to get lucky finding rooms with health packs in them and stuff like that. And the narrative, while it might not do anything too crazy new in terms of science fiction tropes, the way that it incorporates itself into the gameplay is so charming. Charming's not the right word, actually. It's so, I want to say adroit. It's very well done. You know, much like how The Last of Us doesn't really break too much ground in terms of zombie stories, and how Until Dawn doesn't really break too much ground in terms of horror story, but because they're told in this interactive medium of video games, they are better. They are more than the sum of their parts, let's put it that way. People might push back on The Last of Us 1. Both of those games I just gave as an example have adaptations which make me kind of go, what's the point, when the thing that makes them special is that they are video games, especially Until Dawn. But hey, that's go watch my Game Awards video if you want to hear me rant more about that. And yeah, I think my favourite thing about Returnal is it's a game that's also not afraid to be more than what it appears to be. Like, so many games will be like, yeah, we're an over-the-shoulder third-person shooter action roguelike, and therefore it's going to follow this formula, and these are the limits of our gameplay. There are a few curveballs that Returnal throws at you, which make you go, wait, I thought I knew what kind of game I was playing, now I'm playing a completely different kind of game, what the hell is happening? And that's just cool. Also, it's kind of gorgeous. Like, I've only seen the first biome, as I already mentioned, and the first biome is, you know, like this really dark forest. And you would think like a really dark forest couldn't exactly look nice, but it does. Like, just the fidelity of the graphics, I think, make it look really nice. I love the feeling of exploring alien ruins and learning about their civilization and figuring out where I am and what happened and all that stuff. And while there's going to be diminishing returns on that front if I don't get my ass to the second biome, it's still really cool, you know? And it's almost like, I mentioned it was like Metroid. It is a bit of a Metroidvania despite being a roguelike, because you do unlock certain powers which let you access certain types of areas which can randomly spawn in zones. So it's got that going for it as well. So yes, highly recommend Returnal. Just be aware it can get a little spooky, but that's okay. It heightens the narrative. Now, on the other end of the spooky, serious spectrum, the other game I've been playing, or game series I've been playing this week, is Dragon Quest. Why have I got back into Dragon Quest at this particular time, in this particular instance? Well, if you watch this show every week, firstly, hey, thanks. But secondly, you might remember me talking about potentially being burned out on turn-based RPGs when I was trying to continue playing Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D. Well, as it turns out, no, I'm not burned out on an entire genre, I just don't think I like Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D all that much. I was talking about this with a few people, and we all kind of came to the conclusion that it has a few flaws. Firstly, it doesn't really explain the class system very well to the player. I definitely went out of my way to look up a guide, and even then it was a bit of a headache to figure out what I wanted to do, what was the best way to optimize my characters so I wasn't getting curb stomped because I didn't bother reading up. The other problem, or the other main problem, was just that at one point the game opens up and becomes super non-linear, gives you a bunch of objectives to go and chase, and gives you absolutely no indication in which order you might want to go and chase them, because certain areas are lower level than other areas. And that is something I regret not using a guide for, because it did lead to many frustrating moments of spending ages trying to get somewhere and then finding out I needed to either go and grind for hours or go and pursue a different objective. And finally, because your party members are generated characters, there's not really a whole lot of characterization, and because it's an older JRPG, there's also not a whole lot of plot driving the story forward to keep my attention through those more frustrating parts to carry me through that. I'm not saying I've completely given up on Dragon Quest 3 and I will never play it again, but I did decide to just swap it out for Dragon Quest 11, which I have a whole history of. I played the original like 10-hour long demo on Switch many years ago, and then I decided to play it on Xbox Game Pass, and I got up to a certain point, I want to say like probably 15-20 hours in, and then I took a break from that, and then in the intervening time, you know, got rid of Game Pass and went, balls, I should probably pick up this game for myself. So I'm on my third save, and I took a break from, progressing that save, and I've just now gotten back into it, and I'm getting close to where I left off in my Game Pass save, which was, if you're not keeping up, the one I got furthest through. However, I have hit, let's just say tournament arc, I've hit the tournament arc, and I need to go and grind some levels. The only problem with having an overworld in which you can see the enemies and avoid them so that you're not being swamped with like random encounters every 2 seconds is that you are now in charge of making sure that you don't avoid too many monsters and have too low of a level because you haven't been fighting monsters. And so if the plot gets too interesting and you tunnel vision the main objective too much, you're gonna have a bad time. That's not necessarily a criticism I'm levying at the game, but it is definitely something I've run into, and now I'm like, balls, now I need to go and grind monsters, and that's gonna put a dent in my interest to play the game again. But while I was talking Dragon Quest with people, I realised something. I realised I had come to the decision that I'm not going to play any more of my 3DS version of Dragon Quest VII, since Dragon Quest VII Reimagined is just a few months away. It's on the horizon, surprisingly. They actually announced that game pretty close to its release, for modern times, that is. And I remembered when I got Dragon Quest VII for 3DS, I also got Dragon Quest VIII for 3DS, and told myself I wasn't allowed to play it until I beat 7. Well, lo and behold, I'm not going to beat 7. So I actually finally, it must be over a year. It must be at least 2 or 3 years, actually, since I bought the game now. I finally cracked open Dragon Quest VIII and started it for the first time, the 3DS version. And it's an interesting one, because it definitely feels like a response to criticism levied at them for the previous game. Because Dragon Quest VII notoriously, especially the original version of the game, starts with a very, very long non-combat tutorial section in which you're learning about the world and being introduced to characters and doing puzzles. And I didn't hate it, at least not the 3DS version. I thought it was quite cozy, but apparently a lot of people hated it. Worth mentioning, the 3DS version was cut down, and they're mentioning cutting it down even more in the reimagined version. So what's funny is when you load up Dragon Quest VIII, it basically says, "You're a dude, go." And that's like the entirety of it. And instead you learn about who you are and what you're doing as you play through the game's early story, which I think is probably a better way of doing it, but also is kind of funny in just how much of like a kickstart you get when you boot that game up. Obviously it's not a technique they decided to keep because, I can't remember the beginning of Dragon Quest IX off the top of my head necessarily, but Dragon Quest XI kind of takes you back to the slower start. Not super slow, but like, you're a village boy and you're going off on an adventure, but why would you go off on that adventure? And let's examine that. Dragon Quest XI, the more I play Dragon Quest VIII, the more I realise that Dragon Quest XI is intentionally this really traditional fantasy story being told, and makes me suspicious about what might happen in the future of that story, because I think there's going to be a turn at some point. But Christian, I hear you ask, is 11 and 8 the only Dragon Quest games you played this week? Oh no, my dear viewer. You may have noticed that I have not talked about or bought Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D. Oh no, I said it like that. And I still haven't, because I've already talked about picking up Returnal and Spider-Man, and I bought comics this month and stuff, And the main reason I haven't as well is because I want to finish Dragon Quest 3 before I play 1 and 2, but I am more and more thinking I should just go play 1 and 2 and not worry about whatever bonus you get for having finished 3 beforehand. Because it sounds like 1 and 2 kind of don't have the problems that 3 does, with all of the criticisms that I just talked about earlier. I've heard that it's more linear, that there's better characterization in 2 because obviously your party members are real characters, and the job system I think is more fixed as well in 2 perhaps, and obviously in 1 you're a single character. So speaking of 1 then, what did I play? I decided, partially for giggles, but partially because I'm about to watch a live stream of someone playing 1 HD 2D, that I would play the Game Boy Color version of Dragon Warrior 1. And you know what? I was expecting it to feel archaic. I was expecting to run into so many things that would make me go, no, I can't play this version of the game. But actually, for a version of a game from the year 2000, it has a surprising amount of quality of life updates to it. I mean, first of all, you don't have to, open a menu to go downstairs and open doors like you do in the original, from what I've heard. Was kind of hoping that would be the case. But also, when you die, you just return to the king, like in the Switch, the original Switch port from mobile. You don't lose save progress or anything like that, you just lose overworld progress, I guess, and have to get back to where you were. And also it has a quick save, it has a temporary save, so if you're in the overworld and you gotta go do something, you can save the game. It will delete that save when you boot it up, like with a lot of JRPG quick saves, but it's actually a thing back in the year 2000, which kind of blows my mind. Of course, there are still some archaic design things in there, like keys are basically like a consumable item, so if you want to unlock locked doors, you better stock up on keys. But I mean, I'm kind of glad that's still the way it is, because it's a part of history. I think what I'm basically saying is if you're the kind of person who played like Final Fantasy 1 Pixel Remaster and had a really good time, you would probably like the Game Boy Color version of Dragon Quest/Warrior 1. I don't know if I'm going to play it all the way through, but it is actually kind of tempting. And that is not something I expected to be talking about. And if we can squeeze one last thing in here as well, because as you can see, I'm not going to make it through its qualifier. I've re-downloaded Diablo 3 because I wanted a game like Diablo 3, and nothing quite scratches the Diablo 3 itch like Diablo 3. So I've decided to work on my non-seasonal hardcore progression, which is something I've never done before, and we might end up getting a funny video out of it. Who knows? We'll see if I continue to play it. But either way, that's going to do it for this very video game focused episode of Weekly Waypoint this week. I think I'm back on the horse. I kind of took a few weeks off of playing video games for the most part, but we're back, baby, and I am gonna keep playing them and talking about them for as long as they make the damn things. No time for comic talk this week, so you just have to check out Kritigri Talk stories. Catch you next time! Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Weekly Waypoint. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to subscribe for more episodes of the Weekly Waypoint, that option is available to you. I will now stop talking like this. I'm very sorry.